Hello everyone, my name is Nicholas Reid from Reid Corporate, and on behalf of Chalice Mining, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to this special investor webinar for the release of the Maiden mineral resource estimate for Chalice's flagship Julimar Ni-Cu-PGE Project in Western Australia. Thanks very much to everyone for joining us at relatively short notice. I'd like firstly to refer you to the ASX announcement on the Maiden mineral resource and an associated investor presentation, both released on the ASX platform earlier this morning. To give us an overview of the Maiden resource, what it means for Chalice, and the outlook for this world-scale strategic green metals project, it's my pleasure to introduce Alex Dorsch, the Managing Director and CEO of Chalice, and the company's General Manager Development, Bruce Kendall, to the webinar this morning. The format for this morning's webinar is that Alex will run us through a high-level presentation for around 12 to 15 minutes before opening the floor to questions. Because of Alex's very tight schedule today, we're aiming to keep the webinar to approximately 30 minutes. So could I please ask everyone online to use the Q&A tab on the webinar browser to log your questions, and please remember to send them in during the presentation so that I have a chance to put as many of them as possible to Alex and to Bruce in the allocated time. So without further ado, good morning to Alex and Bruce, who are both joining us from Chalice's head office in Perth. Alex, congratulations on this significant milestone. Fantastic reaction from the market this morning. I think the share price speaks for itself. Can I ask you to please go ahead and run us through the Maiden resource presentation?
Yeah, thanks very much, Nick. It's an exciting and also a momentous day for Chalice today, and great to see the positive market reaction to our Maiden resource at Julimar. It's been a very wild ride over the last 18 months since our discovery in early 2020, and obviously a major milestone today for the company as well as the project. So as Nick said, I'll take you through a presentation summarising the resource. Just before I do, the forward-looking statements and disclosures are available here. This is obviously posted on the ASX platform and on our website should you wish to read that in full. Chalice, I think most people recognise the name now in the space. We're a specialist explorer and developer with a world-class Ni-Cu-PGE project right here in Western Australia. So we've reported today a Tier 1 scale pit-constrained Maiden resource for Gonneville. Gonneville's the first discovery at the Julimar project. It's a sulphide resource, as it says there, containing platinum group elements, nickel, copper, cobalt and gold. So the total resource is 330 million tonnes at 0.58% nickel equivalent, or 1.6 grams palladium equivalent. And some pretty spectacular contained metal values, as it says there, 10 million ounces of precious metals, 530,000 tonnes of nickel, 330,000 tonnes of copper, as well as 53,000 tonnes of cobalt. So it is a true polymetallic deposit of quite poignant and quite strategic critical minerals. That endowment's equivalent to approximately 1.9 million tonnes of nickel equivalent, or 17 million ounces of palladium equivalent. So a fantastic starting point for this project. That Maiden resource establishes that Gonneville is the largest nickel sulphide discovery in about 20 years anywhere in the world. So a momentous day. Nickel sulphide discoveries do not come around very often. So it's fantastic to make a globally significant one right here in Western Australia. It's also the first major PGE discovery in Australia. It's easily the largest PGE discovery in Australia, and we think it has significant potential to grow, which I'll take you through in a moment. So having that mix of metals is important because we're now very much leveraged to batteries in electric vehicles and otherwise, and energy storage, but also hydrogen. So the PGEs in particular have a major role to play in hydrogen technologies. And as I said, Gonneville is really only a first bite at the apple. It's 7% of the 26-kilometre long Julimar complex. So that leaves us still with 24 kilometres yet to be tested. So the upside here is quite remarkable. And Chalice, we're a well-funded group. We have an exceptionally good track record of being able to find these types of deposits and define mines. We have 86 million in cash and investments. That was as of the last quarter. And we've had a remarkable run on the market, over 4,000% return to shareholders since the discovery. And as Nick mentioned, up about 20% this morning, which is fantastic to see. So where is Julimar and what is it? It's a province-defining new greenfield discovery. It was effectively a totally greenfield discovery in 2020, as I mentioned. It was staked by us in 2018, so it was taken from effectively a concept all the way to discovery in early last year, and we hit some very spectacular mineralization in the very first drill hole on the project. 25 metres, 8.5 grams palladium, 0.9 grams platinum, 0.1 grams gold, 2% nickel, 0.9% copper, and 0.11% cobalt from 46 metres. So it was fairly obvious from the get-go on this project this was something spectacular. But obviously, making a discovery like that only 70 kilometres northeast of Perth was quite remarkable. We've now based a resource on 520 drill holes at the project. We've actually drilled over 680 holes in total. We've got 6 rigs on site at the moment. So that means assays are currently pending for 160 odd holes outside the resource. And our resource, really, we're talking only about the Chalice-owned farmland. So that's at the southern end of a 26-kilometre long, largely unexplored intrusive complex called Julimar, as I mentioned. So now we're in parallel, we're advancing studies for Gonneville while we go about testing the full extent of the mineral system within that Julimar State Forest area to the north. The project is very well located. We've got direct access to major highway, rail, power, the port of Kwinana, as well as Fremantle, and obviously the large local workforce in Perth. So we're in a very favourable situation from that perspective. So the deposit is a tier 1 scale deposit. It's a pit constrained deposit, so we've put a resource pit shell around the resource to constrain it. But as well as being a very large scale resource, it does have high grade optionality, as well as I mentioned, that compelling growth. So you can see there, looking towards the northeast over Gonneville there, you can see a mixture of oxide and sulfide resources there for that combined endowment of 10 million ounces PGEs, 530,000 tonnes of nickel, 330,000 tonnes of copper, and 53,000 tonnes of cobalt. So very much a polymetallic resource. Importantly, about 45% of what we've defined is already in the indicated category, and we've basically constrained that resource to a pit shell, as I mentioned, and reported above a 0.4% nickel equivalent cut-off grade for the sulfide material and above a 0.9 grams per tonne palladium cut-off grade for the oxide material. The high-grade optionality here is quite important. So high-grade mineralisation at Gonneville starts from a depth of approximately 30 metres, and that I'm referring to there is the high-grade sulfide material. So within that global resource number of 330 million tonnes, we have 74 million tonnes at 1.8 grams PGEs and gold, 0.22% nickel, 0.21% copper, and 0.021% cobalt. That equates to approximately 1% nickel equivalent or 2.8 grams palladium equivalent. So there's, as you can see there, approximately 6.6 million ounces of palladium equivalent contained in a high-grade subset of the resource. And that gives, given how shallow that material is, it gives the project quite a degree of optionality, and it really could enhance the early years of operations here at Gonneville. So looking at that on a grade tonnage curve, obviously on the x-axis there is cut-off grades for the deposit, and the line there is nickel equivalent grade, and the bars there are tonnes of material. So you can see at 0.4% nickel equivalent cut-off grade, we have the global resource at 330 million tonnes, and then you have a relatively flat profile. And it's that flat profile that gives this project that development optionality, that you can really go after the high-grade material very early. And now the growth potential, particularly to the north in the Julimar State Forest, I'll talk about in a moment. But the deposit itself on farmland has a long way to go yet before we fully understand its scale. So we've already drilled holes approximately 600 metres and already intersected mineralisation approximately 600 metres below the pit shell there on the right-hand side with that 18-metre intercept. And also we've got one deep hole approximately 500 metres down plunge of that high-grade material with a very interesting intercept. Those who've been following Chalice would recall that our JD18 intersection at approximately 800 metres down hole there, about 3 metres at 2 grams palladium, 0.5% platinum, 0.5 gram gold, 0.2% nickel and 0.5% copper. That was actually cut by dolerite as well. So you can see there that there is potential just by looking at those open arrows on that figure. You can see that there's a significant potential to grow this resource before we even reach the state forest boundary, which is shown in the green on the left-hand side of that figure. So really, though, the prize here is what potentially lies to the north. So I mentioned Gonneville covers just 7% of the total strike length of the Julimar complex. You're looking at an airborne EM image there, which has been published many times. You can see that the Gonneville deposit on the bottom left-hand side of the page there occupies about 2 kilometres of the strike length. So that's where the resource is, that pit-constrained resource is. And you can see immediately north into the Julimar State Forest area there is some compelling airborne EM targets. Some of those are accompanied by ground EM conductors, as well as coincident nickel-copper anomalies in soil. So we're obviously very excited to get drilling in that area. We haven't drilled a hole as yet within that forest area. We are anticipating the approval to do so very shortly. And we're conducting our operations there with minimal impact. We're using small track-mounted diamond drill rigs to perform that first pass of drilling in that forest, and obviously that will be much anticipated. And as you can see on the bottom left-hand page, as I mentioned, that 680 holes now have been drilled down on our Chalice-owned farmland there at Gonneville. So the deposit has a significant degree of upside that could really transform this project further. Looking at on the left-hand side of the page, there is a gravity image of the complex, and on the right-hand side is that airborne EM image alongside the soil contours, nickel, copper, and palladium. On the left-hand side, you can see just how insignificant Gonneville looks in context of this geological feature. So the gravity there, we believe, is really sort of pointing us to a very dense accumulation of intrusive rocks there at Hartog, and accompanying that, obviously on the right-hand side with that EM and soil response, makes the Hartog target an exceptional one, and we're certainly eager to go in and test it. We're also going to be drilling areas of farmland at Jans and Torres up the northern end of the forest this quarter. So we've got an air core rig working for us at the moment. That will be moving into those areas shortly to test up that northern end as well. So importantly, the suite of metals at Julimar is incredibly topical. We need these metals to decarbonise the global economy and address climate change. Palladium at the moment is doing a lot of the heavy lifting in the space. It is a very versatile but scarce metal. It strips nitrous oxides out of various streams, including exhaust, hydrogen, green hydrogen and ammonia. And those nitrous oxide emissions are very potent greenhouse gases, but the world is currently very much reliant on South Africa and Russia for the supply of that metal. And we've now established that Australia hosts a tier 1 scale resource. So very, very momentous time, obviously, for the company and the country. Nickel, copper need no introduction. They are obviously critical metals in things like electric vehicles, but also electrification in general. And platinum, just like palladium, also a very effective metal in hydrogen applications, particularly in the electrolysis process, generating green hydrogen, but also actually converting that green hydrogen into electricity in a fuel cell again, the world is very much reliant on South Africa for platinum. So to find a new source of these metals in Australia is very significant. The palladium price, as most will have seen, has surged over recent years. That's really because of tightening emissions standards, particularly in China, but also Europe. The emissions standards continue to be tightened as we try and strip more and more nitrous oxides out of exhausts. Hybrid battery electric vehicles as well have a much higher metal content than pure internal combustion engines, so that it further puts pressure on the supply of these metals like palladium and platinum. But really what's on the long-term horizon here is that green hydrogen economy. So palladium and platinum, very useful metals in all sorts of hydrogen applications, the electrolysis, the purification, storage, and ultimately the conversion of hydrogen back into electricity in a fuel cell. But obviously, as I mentioned, that supply of those metals is very much constrained to less than favourable mining jurisdictions. So in terms of our project, what are we doing next? I guess the timeline here shows the key activities upcoming. The initial drilling at Hartog, as I mentioned, but also in the longer term, the scoping study for the Gonneville deposit in the second quarter of next year. You can see we'll be continuing drilling at Gonneville as well as Hartog shortly, and we will be updating our resource as needed. And we'll also be starting the process of a mining licence application next quarter as well. So that upcoming scoping study around about the second quarter of next year is obviously a key one to look out for. In terms of the crux of that scoping study really is around the processing and the flow sheet. The high grade mineralization we've drilled thus far in Gonneville. We've shown that we can process that very effectively using a sequential flotation flow sheet. So we're able to produce two separate metal concentrates that are commercially attractive, and we've achieved very good recovery, a range of recovery there according to grade for those metals, as it shows there on the table on the right-hand side. Importantly as well, there's very low levels of deleterious elements in those concentrates that we've produced to date. So we're continuing that test work. Obviously, there's a lot of metallurgical work to do there to refine our flow sheet. And in parallel to that, we're really now focused on the disseminated sulfide, the lower grade material, which we think we can produce, again, a copper PGE gold concentrate from. But then we are looking into alternatives now as to what to do with the remaining nickel, copper, cobalt and PGE content. So there's a few alternatives that we're currently investigating. We've got a $2.9 million grant from the Commonwealth Government to pursue that. And as I said, that will be part of the scoping study that we release in the second quarter next year. So I think it's important to note as well that the Julimar project, really is a significant one for the local communities in the area. It has the potential to deliver a significant amount of diversification for that wheat belt region, but also a long-term, benefit in terms of jobs and skills and financial benefits. So we're very cognizant of the community, and we're very active and transparent in how we're communicating with that community. We've already established some great relationships in that area, and we continue to demonstrate, I guess, the long-term benefits of having a mining operation or a potential mining operation in that area. In terms of the environment, I mentioned the low impact techniques we're utilising, which don't require any vegetation clearance. So the Julimar State Forest, we're very cognizant of its environmental values. So we're looking to keep our vegetation clearance. We're basically doing the first pass of drilling without any vegetation clearance. And we're doing a series of environmental studies and looking at our biodiversity strategy as a whole, really to make sure we're equipped with the very best environmental information in terms of baseline, but also the best environmental practices for this potential mine. In parallel to that, we're growing our capability in-house. We're looking to build and we have built a small owners team to basically progress studies. We've also got a number of very well regarded and very well known individuals on our board, which I'm very pleased about. And yeah, we continue to attract some of the best talent in the mining industry to this exciting project. Really, what does this mean for Western Australia? I think it means a lot more than just Julimar alone. So the Julimar discovery has highlighted that the western half of the Yilgarn Craton, as it's shown there on the map on the left-hand side, that western side is very much poorly explored. And many of the giant nickel-copper-PGE deposits around the world, like Norilsk, Jinchuan, the Thompson Belt, Voisey's Bay, they're located in a very similar geological position to Julimar. So we think, just given that is so sparsely explored, that western margin of the Yilgarn, we think there's a strong potential for additional Julimar-like discoveries. We've already identified hundreds of intrusions along that 1,200 kilometres of Craton margin, and we're already going about drill testing them. So we've got an air core drill rig working for us at the moment in Barra, and that's about 300 kilometres north of Julimar. We're also doing some work in the southwest with geophysics and flying a huge amount of airborne EM over Julimar and Barra later this quarter. So we think really this is where, this could become very significant for the industry and the state, is that, this discovery is really a province-defining discovery, and hopefully the years ahead host, many more of those. So to summarise, we've got a new world-class strategic deposit of those green metals I mentioned right here in Western Australia. It's got a huge amount of upside, not just in the district of Julimar, but also in that West Yilgarn province. And if you're going to, go about exploration, you need the balance sheet and the funding to do so, and you need the technical skill set. So we've got all of those things in Chalice, and that's what makes obviously the investment proposition for Chalice such a compelling one. So on that note, Nick, I'll hand over to you for some questions.
Thanks very much, Alex. We have a ton of questions, so we'll get straight into them, and we'll try and keep both the questions and the answers as brief as possible. First question is from Mitch Ryan from Jefferies. Mitch says there's been considerable drilling conducted subsequent to the results used for the resource. Will this additional drilling primarily increase the confidence around the resource, i.e. move inferred to indicated, or will it add further tonnes?
So there's about 160 drill holes yet to have assays. So as I said, we've drilled about 680 holes at the project in total. 160 of those yet to be assayed. About half of those are extensional, and about half of those will be looking to upgrade inferred to indicated category. So that's the approximate split, Mitch, half between extension and infill.
Okay, great. A follow-up from Mitch. He says you've constrained the resource using a pit shell. What is the ability to add further resources at depth if you assumed underground extraction beyond the pit shell?
Yeah, we have flagged the potential, I guess, to add underground resource in future, and that's where a lot of our deeper diamond drilling is targeting at the moment. So we're looking at, I mentioned that 1,000 metres of plunge extent or potential plunge extent, down plunge of the highest grade sulfide mineralisation. That's where we're really targeting a lot of our deeper holes at the moment, and that's where we think there's a good potential to add some underground resources in the future.
Thanks very much. Next question comes from Keith Good from Eagle Research. He says, what are your initial thoughts on ore sorting and throughput treatment rates? And what is the potential strip ratio in the open cut?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, Keith. I think we're not quite there yet in terms of understanding how to optimally mine this resource. Obviously, we need to just given the scale of the resource we've reported, there is a long way to go to fully study it and understand sort of what is the optimal throughput. The way we think about it internally is, I guess, phasing the development, looking at a smaller startup case at Gonneville, and then hopefully over time expanding the resource to the north in that Julimar State Forest. So I think really like the first set of results in the Julimar Forest will be quite critical in determining, how might the optimal, mine strategy look. And in terms of the throughput rates, I think that's going to obviously flow from that. So the scoping study is well underway. That's obviously given that this is the first, material discovery in the area. There is a lot of work to be done from the bottom up, essentially, to study the area, the infrastructure, obviously the resource schedule, and then obviously the processing, the optimal processing flow sheet. So those questions will be answered in full in the scoping study, and obviously we look forward to being able to share that with the market, by the second quarter of next year.
Thanks, Alex. The next question is from Peter Arden. He's got a two-part question. Firstly, he says, how do you see the resource at Gonneville evolving? Will you be focusing on increasing all of it, or do you focus more on some of the higher grade zones, which look notionally attractive, but seem to need the whole of the mineralised body to make it really work optimally?
Yeah, I think the centre part of Gonneville, that southern portion, is already largely in indicated category. So I'd say that gives us an obvious sort of starting point for that study. I think really now it's the priority one is obviously drilling within the forest to the north. So should we receive that approval, a lot of our drilling will be redirected up there. But in the meantime, we will continue to do wider spaced step out drilling down plunge, as I mentioned, looking to really add potential inferred category resources, in underground category. But I think that the northern end of the pit, as you picked up there, Pete, you would see that majority of that is inferred. So there is a bit of work to do to bring that up to indicated category, but that's where a lot of the recent drilling has been targeted. Maybe Bruce, do you want to add anything to that?
No, that's pretty well covered. I mean, I think, as Alex said, the priority for us is the state forest, and depending on how that goes is where we will focus rigs. But we do have, as Peter's mentioned, good high grade at depth, and so we'll be continuing to follow that up, but not in a rush. We've got plenty of time to do that work, so we'll be just developing as time goes on.
Okay, thanks very much. The second part of Peter's question was, are you progressing much on downstream and the full suite of PGE metallurgical test work to give you any sense of how Gonneville might best be explored and developed?
Yeah, I mentioned the grant we've got from the Commonwealth government. So, we've got a total program of about $7 million downstream study, if you like, ongoing with approximately 40% of that number funded by the federal government. So that will look at a range of alternatives. We haven't yet sort of selected a likely winner out of that process, but I think what we're clearly seeing is that this project could have the scale that it could lead to a situation where you are looking to capture that value add from downstream. So we are aware of that there's a number of different technologies out there in the space that originated out of Canada, out of South Africa, but also right here in Perth as well. So we're really sort of the first step in that cooperative with the Commonwealth government is to really evaluate all those alternatives. But that we really need to generate a lot of concentrate and a lot of sample to kick that project off. So that's where a lot of the drilling is going to be focused, as well as larger diamond holes to generate that sample and produce sufficient concentrate that we can get some nice downstream test work going.
Thanks very much. The next question is from Al Harvey from JP Morgan. He says, can you please step through the nickel equivalent calculations given the array of constituent elements? He notes or observes that the grades seem a bit low when looking at the individual element level. Will the upcoming study still evaluate a smaller, high grade operation?
Yeah, so first of all, on the nickel equivalent calculation, obviously the first thing to say is that nickel equivalent and any metal equivalent is dependent on really two things: the commodity price assumption as well as the metallurgical recovery. So both of those things have uncertainty to them, and obviously commodity prices do change over time. So really what we've reported there, and in terms of metal equivalent, is to aid, understanding of the combined, grade or combined, value, if you like, of the 6 payable metals, which we consider, the number to be 6 at the moment. So that those do change over time. The recovery assumptions we've used to input there, we've listed in the resource. We've used the lower range of the previously announced recoveries for each metal, and that just really reflects that we just don't have all the test work yet across that grade spectrum to give too much more information. So we've used an approximation for metallurgical recovery, and pricing as well. As it says in the release, we've used a long-term consensus deck, and then we've used a number in the P20 to P30 range of analyst estimates. So we have used, I guess, reflecting that we consider this to be a significant resource that could result in a long life operation. So we're using those longer-term prices really to do 2 things. Define a potential resource pit shell, and also derive those metal equivalent values. So that's all listed in full, Al, in the resource announcement.
Okay, thanks, Alex. There was a second and third part to Al's question. He also noted that there was more of a nickel focus in today's release. Historically, a large proportion of the value was thought to be in the PGEs. Can you explain why the shift towards a nickel story? And he also asked for thoughts about a life of mine strip ratio, which I think you might have touched on a little bit earlier.
Yeah, I think the nickel, we view Gonneville as a true polymetallic resource. So whilst I think the significance of each metal does change over time according to commodity prices. At the moment, it's looking like the PGEs are the dominant value in terms of what's in the ground. But that changes over time. So we view that this is a nickel sulfide discovery with very good PGE and copper credits, and so and being an orthomagmatic nickel copper PGE deposit style, we think it's appropriate to translate that in terms of nickel equivalent. The other thing about the nickel equivalent calculation is that cut-off grade is really determined by the ability to float and concentrate the material, and that's really driven by sulfur content, which is really related to base metal content. So using nickel equivalent cut-off grade, we've selected that in preference for palladium equivalent, just because really the nickel content really drives the flotation performance. So that it hasn't really been a shift per se, but I think what we've done is we've reported both nickel equivalent and palladium equivalent, just to highlight that those are the 2 key metals that we at the moment. But yeah, obviously, if commodity prices change, that's subject to change as well.
And the life of mine strip ratio?
Yeah, so the pit shell we've reported, is approximately 600 meters deep, and if you look at the, you can do a quick calculation to see that the 330 million tons of resource within that pit size equates to a strip ratio of approximately 1. That's an approximation at this stage. It doesn't reflect, obviously, any mining characteristics. So just purely, what the total resource volume divided by the total volume of the pit.
Thanks, Alex. Next question is from Paul Young from Goldman's. He's asked, regarding the scoping study, what mining and mill throughputs in millions of tonnes per annum are you investigating as part of the study?
Yeah, Paul, we're really going to assess a wide range. So I think what's important here is this deposit has that degree of optionality. It doesn't need to be a super high throughput type of operation to begin with. We think there is a material amount of high grade material that you could target with a smaller startup case. So really the scoping study, without sort of prejudicing and trying to predict the outcomes there. We're really looking at the full spectrum of throughputs. And I think that what's really going to drive that decision about initial throughput is obviously commodity prices, but also, costs and ultimate, flow sheet and recovery. So, all of those things have a pretty high degree of uncertainty on them at the moment, but we're certainly making big steps forward in getting more and more information and studying those things at a rapid pace at the moment.
Thank you. And a follow-up from Paul. He says, can you please talk through the water and power options, read the metallurgical test work? Have you done pilot work yet? And have you reached out to global PGM smelters and refiners to test spare capacity and availability?
So we haven't done any piloting as yet. We've done some lock cycle tests. You're trying to, really approximate and try to simulate realistic, full scale performance. So we've done a lot of, lock cycle test work on the higher grade material. We haven't done as much yet on the lower grade material. So that's obviously a work in progress. We do think there is potential to go to a pilot scale in the future. We're not quite there as yet, and really I think that we need to evaluate all the alternatives before we do get to that point. We are still drilling this deposit, Paul. So I think we need to also understand what is the ultimate potential here of this in terms of scale, and that will drive different decisions in the flow sheet and piloting from that. So I think that's the point I'd make about the piloting. We will get there. It's just that at this stage, everything's at lab scale. And sorry, the power. Look, we're fortunate. We're 70 kilometres outside of Perth. Perth has got a very, very convenient high voltage power network running largely north south. That's approximately 20-25 kilometres away from the project. So we do see that that as an obvious option to begin with, but we'll also be looking again into all the alternatives in full in the scoping study.
Excellent, thanks, Alex. Question from Michael Scantlebury from Euroz Hartleys. Do you have any comments on payabilities on the concentrate, and will you consider going downstream to capture some of the value?
Yeah, I think it relates a little bit to Paul's earlier question. I think we have already commenced some discussions with largely copper and nickel smelters around the world. So there's about a half dozen that we've engaged with over the last sort of 6 to 9 months, and really done some price discovery and really understood sort of what parameters they look for in terms of concentrate spec. There's obviously always the potential to go further downstream, but really at this stage, we need to understand and map out all those alternatives in full, and that's what we're really aiming to do with that $2.9 million grant, is really understand what are our alternatives, potentially not to go all the way downstream, but potentially midstream, if you like, to produce enriched concentrates. That's a logical step that we're starting to investigate. But again, the high grade material from the test work that we've seen, it does look logical to us that the initial starting point will be that sequential flotation flow sheet.
Question from Keith Good. He's asked, what is the main hold up in getting approval to drill in the state forest? And I might just add to that question, Alex, a question we had from a shareholder earlier via email about how you might prioritise the drilling in the state forest relative to ongoing drilling at Gonneville itself.
Sure. So, look, I think that we've been working closely with the state government, predominantly the Department of Biodiversity, Conservation and Attractions, who are the custodian of the Julimar State Forest. We've been working closely with them for now, over basically 18 months, ever since the discovery. We look to, our strategy to, explore in that area was twofold. It was, go in and do the initial, non-ground disturbing reconnaissance first, which we got approval to do late last year. And then if it was warranted, we'd go for low impact drilling. and that, drilling, as I said, doesn't require any clearance of vegetation. So, that's been received very well by the department, but we continue to, work with them closely. There are obviously, sensitivities around remnant vegetation and native vegetation in Western Australia. So, all those matters have been worked through, and we believe we're, at very much the final stages of that process. So we've done exactly, that we've been very much responsible in our approach, keep our impact and footprint down to an absolute minimum as we go. And I think now we are at a point where, I think that, the state government does understand that, it is quite important to understand the mineral potential of that forest. So they are working as quickly as possible to work through that approval process. So that's I know it has been a long time coming, but we think we are in the final stages. And as it says in the release, we are anticipating that approval being received shortly. And then in terms of prioritising drills, I think it's pretty easy one. The Hartog drilling gets priority. We've already got a number of the small diamond track mounted diamond rigs working for us already at Gonneville. We've already established and shown the state government that the technique works very well in remnant vegetation on farmland. So we've got a very good demonstration there already to demonstrate that we can drill with very low impact without any clearance. So I think we're raring to go, and we've got the rigs to be able to drill very rapidly in that across that 10 kilometres of strike length between Hartog and Baudin. And we've outlined, I should mention, approximately 70 drill sites to drill across that 10 kilometre strike length. But we do have the ability to drill multiple holes per site. So we are keeping our footprint to those 70 sites, but we have the ability to drill hundreds and hundreds of drill holes.
Thanks, Alex. Alex, I'm conscious that you've got another commitment to get to. I've done my best to get to most of the questions, but to those that we haven't got to, apologies. Perhaps if I could just hand back to you for a couple of closing comments. I believe there is a new 3D fly-through available as well, which is well worth having a look at. But perhaps just a couple of closing remarks from yourself, Alex.
Yeah, look, thanks, Nick. I think what makes Julimar so unique is just the scale of the discovery. Like nickel sulfide discoveries and PGE discoveries don't come around very often. So we're very fortunate in what we've found here, and we're very fortunate that it is in our backyard in Western Australia. So I don't think there's too many parallels to other projects out there, and we're certainly progressing as rapidly as we can. So yeah. Obviously, very much looking forward to drilling in that state forest shortly, and then announcing the results of that scoping study by the second quarter next year.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time to Alex and Bruce in the Perth Chalice office, and to everyone online. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. If we didn't get to your questions, we do apologise. We had a lot of them. But please feel free to reach out to us here at Reed Corporate or to Amelia Walker in the Chalice office. And if you do have any further questions, we'll do our very best to deal with them or to arrange a briefing with Alex one-on-one. So once again, thank you very much, everyone, for your time. And we look forward to keeping you posted on the fantastic Chalice story. Thank you and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks.